We have some incredible breaking news for you.
Giant's Causeway on the coast of Northern Ireland is one of the UK's outstanding natural features.
We have some footage that has been taken on a mobile phone.
There is a stretch of coastline on the northern edge of Ireland that has been studied, photographed, mapped, and walked across by millions of people for hundreds of years. Geologists have drilled into it. Archaeologists have surveyed it. University research teams have scanned it with equipment precise enough to detect a crack the width of a human hair buried 30 feet underground. Every scientist who has ever worked along that coast came away with the same conclusion: solid basalt, all the way through, unbroken, uniform, exactly what you would expect from a 60-million-year-old volcanic formation. That conclusion held for as long as anyone could remember. It held through every survey, every scan, every published paper, every peer review. It held right up until the morning a stone door in the face of that cliff opened on its own, and a team of Irish archaeologists decided, for the first time in recorded history, to walk through it. What they found on the other side has not been officially disclosed. But the people who were in that chamber have talked, carefully, quietly, in fragments and half-sentences, the way people talk when they have seen something that doesn't fit anywhere inside their existing understanding of the world. This is what they've said. The first documented opening of the stone slab occurred in the autumn of the previous year, captured accidentally by a drone camera operated by a man filming the coastline for personal use. That footage circulated widely. It showed a section of basalt cliff face, a slab weighing an estimated 18 to 20 tons, swing outward from the rock with a smoothness that had no geological explanation, hold open for approximately 11 seconds, then return to its original position with such precision that no seam, crack, or gap remained visible afterward. The clip was analyzed frame by independent researchers, film technicians, geologists, and structural engineers. No one produced a credible explanation for how it could have been fabricated, and no one produced a credible natural explanation for why it happened. Geophysical surveys conducted at the site in the weeks following that footage revealed a hollow chamber behind the cliff face. Thermal imaging detected heat signatures inside that chamber consistent with living biological matter. Vibration sensors placed along the rock wall picked up a rhythmic pulse. The site was subsequently closed to the public under a coastal erosion advisory. The research team was formally dismissed from the area, and no findings were published through any official channel. That was last autumn. What happened in the weeks that followed, documented through the private records of the researchers involved, is that the door opened again. Twice more. Each time in the early hours of the morning. Each time for a duration of between 8 and 15 seconds. Motion-activated cameras mounted on the cliff face by the original survey team, left in place after the official closure, captured both subsequent openings. The footage is unambiguous. The slab moves outward, holds, and closes. Whatever mechanism is responsible for that movement, it is not random. It is not seismic. It is not tidal. It operates on a pattern that the team's geophysicists described, in a private communication later shared with a journalist as deliberate. The third opening lasted longer than the first two. 14 seconds. And for the first time, something was visible in the darkness beyond the threshold. Not a figure stepping through. Not movement. Light. A faint, steady luminescence coming from somewhere deep inside the chamber. A glow that had not appeared in any of the earlier footage and had not shown up on any of the radar or thermal scans conducted during the original survey. The cameras recorded it clearly. It lasted for the full duration of the opening, faded the moment the stone began to close, and did not reappear on any subsequent scan or recording. That light is what changed everything. That light is what made a group of professional archaeologists decide that the next time the door opened, they were going in. Dr. Colm Ferris is a field archaeologist based at University College Cork with 22 years of experience working on prehistoric and early Iron Age sites across Ireland and Western Scotland. He is not someone who pursues anomalies. His published work is methodical, technical, focused almost entirely on burial practices and structural analysis of stone monuments from the Neolithic period. He is, by his own description, a man who is interested in facts. He was brought into the situation through Dr. Aoife Nolan, a geologist who had maintained informal contact with members of the original survey team after their official dismissal from the site. Nolan had reviewed the thermal and sonar data independently. She had also reviewed the motion camera footage of the second and third door openings. She contacted Ferris because she needed someone with direct field experience entering sealed or structurally unstable underground spaces, someone who knew how to move carefully in a confined environment and document what they found without compromising it. Ferris reviewed everything over the course of a week. He asked Nolan 3 questions. First, had anyone attempted to verify whether the door's opening pattern was predictable? She told him that based on intervals between the 3 documented openings, the team had a working estimate for when the next opening would occur within a window of roughly 4 hours, and that it had been holding. Second, he asked whether anyone had stood directly in front of the door during an opening. She told him no, that all observation had been conducted remotely. Third, he asked what she personally thought was inside that chamber. She said she didn't know. She said the thermal data described something she had no framework for. She said she thought it was important that someone find out, and she thought it needed to be someone who could keep their head in an environment that was going to be unlike anything they had encountered before. Ferris agreed to go. The team that assembled at the site on a gray Tuesday morning in late February consisted of 4 people. Ferris and Nolan, a structural engineer named Porixio, who had worked on deep cavity assessments in several Irish cave systems, and a documentary filmmaker named Sierra Flood, who brought her own lighting equipment and had been told, plainly, that she might not be allowed to release anything she recorded. She came anyway. They arrived at the cliff face at 3:40 in the morning. The barriers were still in place. The warning signs were still up. They moved past them without stopping. They waited at the base of the cliff for 2 hours and 11 minutes. The stone did not move. The air temperature at the coast was just above freezing. The Atlantic was loud and close. Nobody spoke much. At 5:58 in the morning, the slab began to move. Ferris described it afterward as something that defied the instinct to explain it. He said he had expected it to feel mechanical, industrial, like watching a hidden door in a theme park open on a pneumatic hinge. He said it felt nothing like that. It felt, in his words, like watching something breathe. The stone moved outward slowly, steadily, and the darkness behind it was total except for that same faint glow the cameras had recorded, coming from somewhere further inside, pale and cool, not warm, not like fire, more like the light at the bottom of very deep water. Sio went in first, followed immediately by Ferris. Nolan entered third. Flood stayed at the threshold, filming. The chamber was larger than the scans had suggested. The radar and sonar imaging had indicated a space roughly 12 feet deep and 26 feet wide. The actual interior felt considerably larger, Ferris said, because the ceiling rose above the range of the initial scans, curving upward into darkness that their handheld lights didn't fully penetrate. The walls were basalt. The floor was flat, unnaturally flat, not the rough, uneven surface of a natural cave, but a level plane that Co immediately crouched to examine with a flashlight held at an angle. He said quietly that the floor had been worked. Not recently. Not by any tool he could identify, but worked. Smooth to a degree that natural cooling and fracturing of lava rock does not produce. The light source was coming from the far wall. It was not a crack or a fissure. It was not bioluminescence on a wet surface. It was emanating from within the stone itself, from a section of the far wall approximately 6 feet wide and 4 feet tall, glowing with the same pale, consistent luminescence the cameras had recorded from outside. Ferris stood in front of it for a long time. He placed his hand against it. He said the rock was warm there. Not hot. Warm, the same temperature as a human arm. The figures were not there. All 6 of them, documented on multiple scans as standing in the chamber during the months of observation, were gone. The chamber was empty except for the 3 of them and the glow in the far wall. But the space where the figures had stood was not undisturbed. Nolan dropped to her knees with a flashlight and examined the floor at the positions recorded in the last set of positional scans. She found impressions in the stone, not footprints in any conventional sense. Compression, she said later, as if the floor had softened slightly at those points and then rehardened. 6 sets of them, each one in the exact position of the figures documented in the final scan, each one oriented toward the door, and 1 additional set of impressions, offset from the original 6. Smaller, she said, different in shape, positioned slightly behind the others, near the glowing section of wall, as if something had been standing there that none of the scans had ever detected. They were inside for 9 minutes. The door began to close, slowly and without warning, when their time ran out. All 3 exited without incident. Flood captured all of it. In the days following, Ferris sat with the documentation they had gathered, photographs, Flood's footage, floor impressions recorded with casting compound Nolan had brought in a kit, samples of material from the glowing section of wall collected with a sterile scraper, and attempted to construct an explanation that fit inside anything he already knew. He could not. The floor impressions alone were outside any framework he could apply. Basalt does not soften and reharden at ambient temperature. It does not bear compression marks from stationary objects that have stood in place for any duration. It is not sediment. It is not clay. The impressions should not exist, and yet they were there, clearly visible under angled light, smooth-edged and precise. The material sample from the glowing wall section came back from an independent materials analysis as basalt. Standard 60-million-year-old North Atlantic basalt, chemically indistinguishable from any other section of that cliff face. There was no foreign element, no embedded mineral, no compound that explained why it was luminescent, why it was warm, or why the luminescence ceased the moment the stone door closed and resumed each time it opened. Nolan's own assessment, shared privately with Ferris and written up in notes she has not published, is that the chamber is not an anomaly inside the rock. It is not a hollow space that happened to form during the volcanic cooling process 60 million years ago. The geometry is wrong for that, the floor condition is wrong for that, and the precise orientation of the door itself, which opens on a vertical axis, hinge at one side, with a clearance at the base of less than 2 millimeters when closed, is structurally impossible as a natural formation. The chamber was made. It was made a very long time ago. And whatever made it understood at the time exactly how basalt behaves as it cools, and use that knowledge to seal the entrance in a way that would become indistinguishable from the surrounding cliff face within years of the eruption. That means something understood the geology of this coastline before the rock was even solid. That means something was here, working with materials and planning for concealment, 60 million years before the first human being stood upright anywhere on Earth. The question that sits under all of this, the one that Ferris returns to and cannot set down, is not about the chamber. It is not about the impressions on the floor or the warmth in the wall. It is about the additional set of impressions. The seventh set that no scan ever detected, positioned slightly apart from the others, near the light source, as if it had been standing there for a very long time in a spot nobody thought to look. The original survey identified 7 figures in the chamber, then 6. One disappeared between scans with no physical evidence of departure. When the team entered the chamber, all 6 documented figures were gone, and 7 sets of impressions were on the floor. Not 6. 7. Whoever, whatever was standing near that wall in the position no instrument detected was not one of the 6 that the team had been watching. It was the one that had supposedly vanished. The one everyone assumed had already left. It had never left. It had simply moved to a part of the chamber that the sensors weren't measuring, and it had stayed there in the dark, while the scans ran and the researchers watched and the barriers went up outside and the tourists walked past on a path above, taking photographs of the black hexagonal stones. It was there when the team walked in, and by the time they looked at the floor and understood what the 7th set of impressions meant, it was already gone. The door to that chamber has opened 8 times now, by the team's most recent count of all documented footage, each time for a slightly longer duration than the last. The most recent opening, captured on camera 3 weeks ago, lasted 41 seconds. Whatever is inside that cliff is not in a hurry. It has been waiting for 60 million years. 41 seconds is nothing. It will take all the time it needs. And when it is ready, it will come through that door not because a sensor alarmed or a barrier was breached, but simply because it decided to. The same way it always has. On its own schedule. In its own time. Into a world that is still, even now, completely unprepared for it.